In this video, we're talking about design thinking and how you could start using it today to help your business adapt and change. I'm Eric Oakland, head of innovation at TrueScribe and Squiggle. TrueScribe creates custom hand-drawn whiteboard videos for communication and marketing, while Squiggle is a do-it-yourself video creation software for corporate training and education. Joining me today, my guest is Darin Eich. And Darin is a design thinking keynote speaker, trainer, and facilitator. He's the founder of innovationtraining.org and author of the book Innovation Step by Step. Darin, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Great. All right. Thanks, Eric. I'm excited to chat with you today and get into design thinking and see where the heck we might go.
And I hope that this is our hope is that this is a great tool for you who are curious about design thinking, know a little bit about it, and maybe want to just figure out how to get started in it. So
Sure.
let's start off with the question, Darin, of what is design thinking?
Sure. Yeah. Design thinking is a way to help you work on wicked problems, right? Or wicked challenges, things that are maybe complex and like, how do you create solutions, right? So I know we all have all kinds of problems or opportunities or challenges that come up. And it's almost like a framework or an approach or a process to be able to address those challenges, problems, opportunities, whether it's creating new products, creating new services, or any kind of innovation, a new thing you may have never done before, or doing something in a way that you've never done before and you have to learn how to do it. Design thinking is kind of we'll say a field or an approach that'll help you to do that. So one of the places that I love to turn to learn about design thinking is IDEO in Palo Alto. And I think they look at design thinking as a process for creative problem solving. So, that might be the simplest way to look at it. Hey, it's a process for creative problem solving, and we can work on, many kinds of problems. But the key thing about design thinking that makes it a little bit different than other ways of going about innovation is that it's a human centered approach, right? So that's almost the key term here is human centered. It begins with your users or your customers or those you're trying to help or serve or design for or create for or help with a problem that they have, even if it's a very specific one. So that's what makes design thinking a little bit different and kind of the shift I had to make on my journey from, thinking of what do I want to do or what do we want to do and then create it in private and then launch it and be surprised when not many people want it or need it, right? It's a different approach where you begin with those you're trying to help or serve. What do they want? What do they need? And how do you find that out? Almost like an archaeologist or an investigator, right? How do you uncover through qualitative research, generally, interviewing people, observing, what it is that they want or need. What do you notice? What do they tell you? What do they say? What do they email you about or chat to you about? The qualitative kind of data in their own words. So, that's what I would say design thinking is it's a, process for creative problem solving that's human centered. And it's also the most popular approach for innovation from a couple of studies that we've done and another one we've looked at. So it's a method for innovation. So it's a lot of things. It's a really kind of a big thing, Eric. Yeah.
No, it sounds like it. And I think one of the things that might help people either adopt it or get it into their organization is knowing more about what value does design thinking bring over other methods or other tools. Um, what is the benefit to an organization that uses design thinking?
Yeah, I think the benefits are you get evidence. You rely on evidence instead of a guess for what people want, what do people need. Well, in the past, you might have tried to think of that yourself or make that guess, or worse yet, not really think about the people that you're trying to design for and just think about what you want and what you want them to want, right? So this is a shift. This is beginning with them and you're getting evidence from them, usually in things that they say, things that they do, things that they show you, things you might be observing, right? Maybe you interview 10 people to find out, hey, what is it that you need now? Tell us about, what you need to do in your work and, what problems are you having? What solutions are you looking for? And then maybe we can design that for you or even with you. So I think that's why it helps you to be more successful is because that's ultimately what you're here to do, maybe in business or an organization, is to create a product that's going to be successful for you and also for your customers or for your users. Those two things have to go together, right? It can't just be a success for one. So this helps you to uncover that early. What is the right direction that you should be going in? What is the right problem that you should be working on? How do you get ideas even from your customers or your users? And then how do you maybe prototype or test with them? So you also get to do things a lot faster, we'll say. It's kind of an agile approach to innovation too. That's not only close to your users or your customers, but also you go through these iterations and these stages, and you can do it really quickly, and you can validate as you go with the people that you're designing for. So that's the thing that I think about, especially for me, and kind of the shift that I've made, and trying to be really user focused and design for what people want and need. And for me, is it's helped me to get it right a little bit more, right? To be a little more successful with knowing that what we're creating is something people want, need, and are willing to pay for or invest in or use. And it's able to help us move quickly, and it's able to help us have more meaningful work too. I think that's another impact for people, is it's human centered, right? You get close to your customers or your users, you might observe them, interview them, spend some time with them, and you see the real people that you're there to serve and to help with what you're doing in your organization. And when you can do that, there's a whole new level of purpose or meaning or inspiration behind your work too. So that's another big thing about design thinking, is it begins with empathy. So your first stages are trying to gain empathy, understand your customers, your users, the people you're trying to design for. And when you're doing that empathy work, you unlock something in yourself, right? When you're doing that human centered work, when you're interviewing somebody like we're doing here, and you can see them, right? Even digitally or virtually, it unlocks something more than a survey where we're 1 through 5 on this. Oh, this is a 4.8. This is a 2.7. 70% of people are this. Now we're getting to the real stuff here with real people, and that unlocks kind of a new source of meaning or purpose, I think, or inspiration in your work. That's what I like. Yeah. Hmm.
So it sounds like you're more likely to succeed at solving the problem. You get through it quicker, or at least find solutions or a path quicker to that solution. And it's that human centered aspect means likely you're going to get more buy in, have more involvement, which adds, if it's a human centered and data centered approach, will add to the efficacy of the information that you're using to get through the process. Um,
I think so. And there's so many paths you can go on too, right? There's a ton of directions you can go on, but it helps you identify what is the direction that's going to lead to, the direction that is the most important for our customers or our users, the one they want us to go down, right? With them and for them. So I think that's an important thing. It helps you validate and make better decisions, I think, as well, because you're getting the evidence, right? It's almost like you're starting with a qualitative research of trying to help you understand, what do we do? What should we work on? What's the real problem here, the challenge? What are the ideas then that we can do? What do people want and need? Did we get it right? Right? It helps you to do that. Well, in the past, that might have been something you felt you needed to do in secret, right? And not show anybody what you're working on. And then ta-da, unveil it. And they're like, oh, we didn't need this in the first place. Did anybody want this? And from kind of the startup world, Eric, that you see that all the time. People create a startup. They could tell it was something they wanted to do with a technology they were really interested in, and they didn't even get one customer for it, right? You see that quite a bit, and that's when you're just beginning with you and what you want, and not starting with your customer or your user. So that's kind of the biggest example that you see commonly. So surprising, most people don't use a process or a method for, we'll say, creating solutions, right? If you got a challenge or a problem, you just think, right? Well, even just thinking, you can use activities, tools, techniques, methods to help you get more ideas, better ideas, anything like that. So most people just don't use a structure or a process, and I think that helps to be able to do that.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. We want to be more successful with the things that we approach, and especially if we're going to put time and energy and ask people to be involved in it, we want it to be meaningful. So, TrueScribe and Squiggle are both visual companies.
Yep.
TrueScribe specifically, we create visuals. We create the images that support ideas and words and stories.
Yep.
How important is visualization in the design thinking process, or is there a certain part of the process where visualization becomes most important?
I think visualization like happens throughout the whole design thinking process, and it's not really a linear process. One of the most popular approaches to design thinking comes from the Stanford D School. Or you might go through stages like beginning with empathy. That might be the first stage, empathy for your customers or your users you're trying to design for. Then you might define, based on what you're hearing, seeing, define what the problem is or the challenges you can help them with. Then you might ideate and go through the ideation process to try to create a lot of ideas. And then after you ideate, you might prototype. You might say, okay, let's build some representations of these ideas that are visual, a little sketch of it or a physical thing that we can do. And then test. Okay, now that we've prototyped, let's test it on, the users or customers that we're trying to design this for to see, how we might iterate it or if it's something that they want or need or what else they might need instead. So you can visualize at every step of the process, even at the very first stage of empathy, you can create an empathy map, which is almost like a canvas where you might, visualize, here's who my customer or my user is. It's not everybody. It's a very specific kind of person, you know what I mean, who maybe has a specific role in an organization, like the director of training at large organizations, right? That's even still pretty general, but you might visualize and understand who that person is, draw them in action with kind of the things that they do or the problems that they have to see that. When you ideate, you generate ideas. I love to just create long lists of ideas that are text, and then I like to really zero in and converge quickly, maybe going from 300 ideas to, hey, what are the top 40? And then what are the top 9? And then how do we draw that? How do we visualize that? Show that in a visual or even physical way. And that helps you then to show it to other people because they're not going to understand just a bunch of text, right? So in design thinking, we want to get away from text and tell, I'll say, to show and engage and experience. So giving them a prototype, something visual that they can see, they can almost hold in their hands, is going to be a powerful thing to help them understand the idea. Because that's a hard thing to do, is help people understand a new idea that hasn't existed before. And we got to, tell stories and show visuals and use all the things that work for a human being, right? Because remember, this is a human-centered approach. And well, if I could show something, the other day I was walking through this park near me. I have this wonderful like Glenwood Children's Park, it's called, and it's kind of a woods and with cool areas to play in. And I found this laying around in there, and it looks like a kid made like some app or game on his phone, and piece of cardboard that looks like the phone with some stuff drawn in there, sketched in there. Here's maybe the first part of the game or whatever, and second. So this is almost like an example of a rough, rapid, down and dirty prototype, something visual where you just draw on cardboard or paper or a digital tool that you can use to show people. So yeah, visuals are key throughout the whole process. It's part of the design thinking mindset. And that's the thing that I love most about design thinking are there mindsets that go with it as well. And these are mindsets like having a bias to action. Now, how do we just get into action? That's how we learn. That's how we do. That's how we uncover things, is by getting into action, doing the real thing. How do we show, don't tell? That's another one of the mindsets from the Stanford D School, actually. And that's kind of your area, right? It's not just tell. And for me, it's not just a bunch of text, but how do we show visually something, even if it's something we just sketch out on the back of a napkin or a whiteboard or something like that, right? Then also collaborate across boundaries. This is design thinking. We're working on wicked challenges, and it's hard to do on your own. So how do we collaborate with others on it? And how do we focus on human values? That's another one of the mindsets, and that relates to why you would visualize something, is that's how human beings' brains work, right? That's the most powerful way to learn something, and kind of a one-way method is by seeing it, right? A video or images, right? And then ultimately maybe getting their hands on something or engaging in it. So those are, I guess, some things that I think about when it comes to, where do visuals come in. And it's empowering too to help people kind of get into that place where maybe they haven't drawn something and showed it to another person since they were in school, right? You would be surprised, right, at how people don't do this. And for me, I'd say I'm a lower on the skill level in terms of drawing or sketching or even writing, handwriting that people can read. But everybody can do it, right? And you can get better at it too. So you can unlock something in people if you help them to kind of draw a little sketch or learn how to do that. It can help them become a better communicator, a better design thinker, a better innovator. And then when you're drawing too, you get new ideas, right? It helps you think about stuff. So it's a benefit for not only the person you're trying to design for or innovate for, but for yourself. It helps you with your process too. That's what I found on my journey, at least.
Yeah. With the drawing myself, It's
Hmm.
always been the fastest way to understanding with another individual. You
Yeah.
can use words, you can talk to them, but it sometimes takes more time, and you don't know for sure that you're leaving with the same picture in your head.
Yeah.
If you can put something on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper and point to it and say yes this and no that, you can
Hmm.
zero in very quickly on
Oh
what
yeah.
you're talking about. And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, you know, design thinking isn't a process you go through and then start teaching people.
Yep.
It's something you're learning all the way through. You're teaching
Yeah.
people how to participate in it. You're teaching
Hmm.
people how to extract information from it, or to hold some of that information in their heads. And
Yeah.
if you just explain it through words, that's not going to stick as well as if you
Yep.
can pair that
Yep.
with images. It doesn't make it as concrete unless you can pair it with some images and some visuals that become part of the language of that process, become part of the language of that solution. Then um, you think of the way we wave banners to represent visually that we're part of a group. These
Yeah.
images
Yeah.
become banners for the progress that we're making, for the goals that we're achieving. And a few of the ways I might say, TrueScribe tries to help organizations do that is certainly when there's stories to tell, tell that
Hmm.
story visually. So it might be at the beginning of the process to define what the problem is, and align people to what is the story that
Oh
we're
yeah.
that we're trying to accomplish. It could be infographics to talk about the process, the steps we're going to take,
Hmm.
where are we going next, and how do these things relate to each other? How are they connected? And infographics do a great job of non-linear storytelling. And then if that's um, we've done some work drawing on whiteboards and post-it notes during meetings and conversations, and we've done a little bit of that online to help people, a group of people, visualize the things that are being talked about, so that they can again take that the important process of coming with a solution, so the
Hmm.
artifacts of getting there, not just the final visual, but they can take that with them too, and
Oh
and
yeah.
and hold on to it so they don't forget it when it's time to come back and take on the next part.
Yeah, exactly. I just had an idea. Maybe we run an experiment. That's like part of design thinking is you try stuff that maybe you haven't tried before and you run an experiment. So maybe what I'd like to do now is just maybe spend a few minutes showing some images that might, be metaphors or the design thinking process that are even just sketched out by somebody, and see if that works for helping people understand, what design thinking is, maybe a little bit better than, how I just talked through it before. So if you've got the images up,
Yep,
Eric, I might walk through some of these.
I have them in front of me.
So this first one I like, it's got two brains, right? So a lot of people think this innovation work is an isolated activity. You get by yourself in the garage or the lab and you just think, like, no, it's like, and you don't need to create the ideas yourself. You don't need to create the solutions yourself. You can create them with the people that you're trying to create for your customers or your users. So for me, that's a big goal of design thinking almost, is how do you make that connection, right? To another person's not only brain but their heart as well, right? Because this is a human-centered approach that begins with empathy. How do you understand them and create ideas together? Have the flow of ideas go between both people, so you're creating an idea that is the kind of thing they may want. And that's a good way to get started with design thinking for a lot of people. Just look at the emails you're receiving or the chats you're receiving from people where they'll share with you, hey, here's a problem I have, or do you do this, can you do this, right? The second is an image that is on the cover of my innovation step-by-step book, where it's almost here's the basic three stages that I've seen amongst design thinking processes, and there are a ton of design thinking processes out there. I think I mentioned both Stanford D School and IDEO. They both have their own processes and mindsets and things, and a lot of other places will have this, but they all have the three kind of same stages. And design thinking brings everything together, right? It's not just we're just going to do research and try to learn from our customers. And it's not just we're going to generate ideas for new products, solutions, ideas, anything. It's all about how do we get into action? How do we create a real solution that's going to make a difference for people? And how do you launch that, right? And you launch it in a really tiny way almost, by prototypes, by testing it on people. Some people may want to buy it or start signing up when they just see a rough prototype, even a visual that you give them, or a short video or a landing page, even before you have the thing built, right? It's a way for you to start getting into action. It gets you into action and helps them get into action too. So that's an image. And the next image is, quite similar. It's those three stages, the challenge stage, the idea stage, and then we've got to get into action stage. So IDEO, I think they call, their main three stages: inspiration, ideation, implementation. So you can kind of see it similar. When I first started getting into design thinking, and we brought a group to IDEO, um, over 10 years ago now. And they popularized something called human-centered design. So you'll also hear design thinking sometimes referred to as human-centered design. And what I liked about that is they had a good little acronym, HCD, human-centered design, for kind of the three main stages: hear, create, deliver, right? So all of these stages you'll see out there with design thinking and processes and methods, all quite similar, but they just may have different stages, steps, names to that. And then ideally, a lot of them, are going to go through a lot of diverging and converging, where you may start with a very specific challenge space, we'll say, like you want to help directors of training with virtual workshops and how to put those on, right? That's a very specific thing. Then you might diverge into all kinds of insights from them, and then converge on, hey, here's the main thing we can help them with. And you might diverge again into a lot of ideas for different offerings, services, products, ways you can help. Then you might converge on the top ones and then build those out, right? But ultimately, like the next image, we're just trying to make that connection. I think that's the most important thing with design thinking, is to get out of your own kind of space. And I've talked to, some folks. I remember a VP of engineering we worked with, once told me that he has a hard enough time to get the engineers that work with him to connect with the people in the office next door, much less getting out there into the field and actually observing, interacting, interviewing a customer or a real user. So that's almost a real good place to start, is how do you just plug in to your customers or your users and just interview them or observe them or something like that. And that could be a matter of the next image, finding out who these specific people might be. It might be a very specific kind of person with a specific kind of role, specific kind of challenge is the one you're really designing for. So, and then when you're interviewing, you don't need to take a class in interviewing, really. Some of these things help, but how do you just have a conversation, right? To learn, who they are, what they need, do they have any solutions? And how do you figure out some of the details with that, just with who, what, where, when, why, how questions, or other questions like, tell me more, or just being silent and then letting them say the next thing, right? And by doing that, just like the next image, you might find out their problems, right? And then when you find out the real problems, the real things they need solutions for, and you've got the relationship, the connection, maybe ideas from them for what they want you to start to work on, you can do the whole thing a lot easier than maybe the old way, where you're trying to guess, you're trying to do it in isolation. You've got the relationship with them where you can bring back a prototype to show them, test it out on them to see what might work. And they may even say, hey, we need this, we're ready to roll, right? So that's a way of kind of just using rough images, rough sketch images, to kind of describe something. So it goes back to your mission almost, Eric, is, helping people get to that visual realm and see how powerful it is.
Absolutely. So we've talked about some larger concepts. There's large organizations and there's history behind design thinking. There's a number of different ways to go, processes to implement, to do design thinking. And so there's a lot of choice.
Yeah.
But that also can mean that there's requires some buy-in. How would an individual in an organization go about starting some design thinking? Can they do it on a small scale, and when would be, or where would be a good place to start with that?
Absolutely. So I think with design thinking, you don't really need anything. You don't really need any special tools, resources. I think learning a little bit is helpful, right? That's the thing with a lot of the stuff that I'm into is like innovation and design thinking. And most people didn't have a class on innovation or design thinking in school, right? Nor have they really maybe had training on it in their workplace, right? Learning processes or approaches or tools or techniques or mindsets or methods for innovation or creative problem solving or design thinking, or how to do qualitative research and analyze it, synthesize it to know what to do. So learning a little bit could be helpful, and that could just be scrolling around the web to find great resources. But the best way to learn this stuff is to do it, right? Design thinking is hard to understand by somebody telling you about it, but it's easier when you're doing it and you're maybe going through stage by stage. So a place an individual could start could be, hey, who are my customers or my users or the people I'm serving? An application I really love is helping organizations use design thinking to design a better employee experience or a more innovative culture in their organization. So in this case, they're designing for each other, right? They're all a part of that culture. So how do you just start to maybe interview a few people about the thing you're working on, right? So like if you're doing a project where, hey, we want to have an awesome culture in our organization. Could you grab 5 people and just interview them about that and about their experience, what it looks like to them, what, where, when, why, how, not having any specific, deep list of questions to ask, but knowing that your focus and the point you're trying to get to is, what solutions could we create around here to have a better culture? Because a lot of organizations struggle with that. So if you're designing products or services, who are the users or customers of these? Do you already know 5 of them? Can you interview them to learn, what are you working on now? What do you need now? What's missing, to just try to gain some empathy for them and see what they might need. If you're in marketing, who are you trying to reach? Who are the potential customers you're trying to reach with your marketing efforts? Could you interview some of them to figure out how they, learn about stuff, became aware, become interested in things and what they need, So I think that's a good place for one person to start is just by, can you interview, 5 people? And there's different levels of interviewing. Remember, design thinking is human centered. The most human centered way of doing it might be, can you go to them in person, right? And see their environment, see their where they work, their office or whatever, see them doing the thing that you're trying to help them with. If they're using a software that you're trying to help them with, can you look over their shoulder and see them to do that? And you can do that digitally or in person by Zoom. That's a good technique, kind of what we're doing right now. So that's a gold standard, is being with them in person. But if not, can you at least do a video kind of interview so you can see them and gain that empathy and see the body language and things? Or if not, can you at least do a phone call, right? These don't have to be hour-long things. They can be 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, or catching somebody in the hallway or for 5 minutes. Or if you can't even do a phone call, can you do an email, right? Exchange. But you want to see what are they saying in their own words, right? So that would be a great place to start, is just by interviews. And then from there, even from 5, you may identify, hey, here's a thing that I can really start to work on, an innovation I can start to create, because a lot of the people mention this as a need they had, right? So you're trying to uncover the unmet needs. And then you might create a lot of ideas using different tools or techniques. Maybe you heard ideas from them already, or you're doing it with them. And then, okay, now I've got a bunch of ideas. How do I zero in on what are the best? Maybe they help you to decide that, or some voting or things like that. Or you then take it to the visual level and create an image, maybe a comic strip of this thing you're trying to help them with, or a whiteboard video, right? Or anything else, or a physical prototype, but something you can show, and that helps you know what direction to go in next. But all these things, I think, are simple. They can be done in a day even. So you may even say, hey, here's my design thinking day to go through. I'm going to just apply a process of maybe 3 stages and really try to learn about my customers or users, create some ideas for them, and then start to build a prototype I can maybe implement. Right. So
So
that might be a way to get started for just one person. Yeah.
that's fantastic. And it seems like whether that's, you could start with something that's low risk, but just you want to go outside of your own self and your own ideas for creating something or putting something out into the world. Or as you mentioned, as an entrepreneur, find the people that you think are this is going to be a solution for, and start with a handful and see if you're building for somebody as opposed to just for yourself. Um,
Yeah.
Now, when is it appropriate to scale that, or to maybe, and by that I mean maybe invite in professionals to help with design thinking, or to go through some more formal training to develop a process that maybe gets more people bought into it. Um,
Yeah.
when is it important to get real or get serious about design thinking?
Yeah, I think for my approach is, it's good to get real a little bit. I don't think you need to maybe do a 2-year program on design thinking, right? Maybe if you want to do this as a full-time career, There's a lot of user experience professionals out there that kind of are quite expert on design thinking. And that's another way they describe design thinking. It's, helping regular people in all kinds of roles use tools from the designer's toolkit, right? How can a, regular person in the work they do be like a designer, right? So I think for designers, yeah, you might want to spend a lot of time learning this, but for a regular person, I think you could gain a lot in just spending a day learning. Maybe it's a 1 day workshop or a 2 day workshop or a boot camp or some online programs. But ultimately, if you're going to do a learning experience, you got to do a real project, right? So any learning experience should help you to do a real project where that's how you're learning, because that's the most powerful way to learn this and to do this. So that's how I think somebody gets started. So for organizations, I think a key approach is in scaling this is how do you start training a number of people on design thinking? And why I'm saying design thinking is because it's the most popular approach to innovation, and by quite a bit. We did a kind of a study where we interviewed about 100 people from different organizations who were kind of the innovation leaders at innovations, and that was the most popular approach. And I saw another study done by a professor at Stanford, I think last year, where they looked at all the approaches to innovation and which were the most, promising and widely adopted and popular in organizations. Design thinking was one. Agile was number two, which is kind of what you might do after design thinking, especially when it's time to really implement this thing and make it almost quite good. So that's what I think is, let's expose a lot of people to the basics of design thinking, and get them started with applying it to their own work. So a person might think, okay, how do I apply design thinking in my own role, my own work, for the people that I'm serving or the humans that I'm trying to help with our products or services or whatever I do. So I think that's a good place to start, is just with a bit of a training, and that's going to help you to do a real project for your own work, or maybe it's something you work on together in your organization, a new way of doing something in your organization, that could be, take it to the next level. So that's what I think is a good place to start, is just with a little bit and get into action. That's the mindset for design thinking too, is having a bias to action. So I think that's the key. And like I said, not a lot of people have ever learned design thinking or innovation before. I don't think you need a 3 credit class at a university. But how do you get started with learning the basics and getting into it, and then keep adding to your toolkit as you go? Because you can get really bogged down with trying to learn all these. There might be 100 activities that you can do in the design thinking world that fit with the different stages. You may not need, more than a few to learn to get started, to start having an impact in your work, getting closer to your customers or users, being more creative to create better ideas, prototyping them rapidly in better, more visual, physical ways. Yeah.
So, well, thank you for taking design thinking and pulling it maybe off of a pedestal and making it something that people can approach and give permission to people to get started with it in small and simple ways, and there isn't a barrier for anybody to get into it.
Yeah.
What would be some good resources if somebody did want to dive down the rabbit hole of design thinking? What resources do you have for people to kind of learn more about it or to get help with it?
Yeah, I think that's what we've been doing on one of our websites. We have a website called innovationtraining.org that, I don't know, for the last 10 years or more, we've just been, posting design thinking resources and things like that. So I think that would be a good place. I'd recommend is just going to that site, innovationtraining.org, and clicking on the resources, header, and just going through and seeing what interests you. You can learn a lot of different techniques, like empathy mapping, or customer journey mapping, or creating customer personas, or the mindsets for design thinking, or the most popular design thinking books, or research on design thinking and the impact and things like that. So that's kind of what we try to do, is collect a lot of the high impact practices, the most popular approaches and tools, and share them with people. Like I said, for me, I started to learn about design thinking, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago through IDEO and through the Stanford D School. We brought a group to IDEO as a part of a program over 10 years ago, and that was quite powerful. So they're some of the originators, I would say, of making design thinking popular. And they give away incredible resources too. That's what I found over the years. So I keep learning a lot from IDEO and Stanford D School. as a couple of sources. And now it's quite widespread where a lot of organizations have their own design thinking kind of approach or process or anything like that. So it's really grown, but that would be a place that I would search for resources as well. But ultimately, how do you start to do your own project? Just a simple one for innovating maybe how you work, for the people that you're trying to serve. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Now, your book, Innovation Step by Step, is available on Amazon.com, correct?
Amazon. And, for me, we're always the higher level, but I think both of us are with like visual and how powerful visuals are. For me, I'm not as excited about just reading something or just listening to something. I want to kind of see something or engage in something. So I think the best thing is we've got like online workshops that are on kind of the book and that method. That the method we have is a design thinking process that's really short term. Like if you're just going to do something in 2 hours, here are the steps to take, and we'll guide you through the project. So you can see examples of what that looks like every step of the way for a real challenge, like creating an innovation program in your company or having a more of a culture of innovation in your organization. Or nowadays, it could be like, hey, I've got to go digital in my work. I've got to do my workshops or my programs remotely, and I want them to be live with everybody together in the same place, creating together on the same whiteboard. Maybe that's my challenge, is how do I do something like that. So I think a kind of an experience like that might be the most helpful to see what you do at every step and then follow along for your own challenge that you're working on. Even if it's like redesigning the meeting you typically do at an organization for those people that are at the meeting, you can use the design thinking process for that. Or in other cases, hey, I've got to figure out what I should do in my career now. So how do you use design thinking where you're designing for yourself and how you can have a career that is meaningful for you? How do you go through that process and apply that to yourself too? So we've used design thinking for all of these scenarios, whether it's a organizational culture, product, services, the individual and the career and what they might do with their life, or a big social problem. I have engaged over 1 million middle school and high school students in a program called Lead to Feed. It's now known as Lead for Change, that helps them kind of fight hunger in their community or somewhere in the world, and kind of learn using design thinking to do that. From who are you trying to help and what are the ideas to how do we start to launch this thing. So that's what I'd recommend, is look for like the higher kind of level of learning something where you're going to get to see demonstrations of it, or you're going to get to do it yourself with a guide or a coach. So going beyond the reading or just the listening, but that's a good place to start too.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you again, Darin, for joining us to talk about design thinking and unlocking how we can get started with it, to not be intimidated by it, and apply it to many different areas of our work. What's the best place for people to find you online?
Yeah, I'd just say innovationtraining.org, just to pop in there. And, I love to hear from people too. We're design thinking world. It's human centered. I love when people kind of send an email with, hey, here's what I'm working on, or here's what I'm thinking about. Here's a challenge that I've got, or here's a solution I'm looking for. Do you by chance have that or can create that? So for me, that's what I love is, just send me an email, reach out to me through that site, or find me on LinkedIn or anything like that for kind of an update on other resources and things like that. But yeah, I love to hear from people and see what they're working on and why are they interested in design thinking, that kind of thing. I'd love to hear. And yeah, I've enjoyed, collaborating with you on this, Eric. It's been great. And I love kind of your area of kind of helping people with visual storytelling, right? In so many different ways. And I think that really fits so well with design thinking, because it's a human-centered kind of thing to try to help people to do that. And maybe the higher level thing you're helping people with too is, be a better storyteller themselves, not just have a better story, but be a better storyteller, a better creator, more creative, an artist, almost a visualizer, and to get started with that themselves. So yeah, I've enjoyed this.
Thank you. And if you're watching this, wherever you're watching it, leave us a comment below on how you've experienced design thinking, perhaps implementing it, participating in it, and how that went for you, and what your thoughts are on it. And let us know if you like this topic and if we can do more on it in the future. Darin, thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it.